Session, we're going to learn about intercellular junctions. So, as the name suggests, it is a junction between two cells. Intercellular, which means it is a junction between two cells. You can see here we have one cell, the other cell. Between two cells, we have some junctions which are named as intercellular junction. We will study detailedly about these junctions: tight junction, gap junction, adherent junction, what is desmosome and hemidesmosomes, and what is the function of each junction separately. So what is the definition for intercellular junction? It is the connection between the neighboring cells or between the cell and the extracellular matrix. So that is the definition. So simply we should know that is the connection between cell to cell or between the cell and the extracellular matrix. So that is the definition for intercellular junction. And these junctions are classified into three types: occluding junction, communicating junction, and anchoring junction. So the best occluding junction is tight junction, communicating junction is gap junction, and we will study detailedly about these junctions. So occluding junction, which means it is going to prevent the passage of substances from one cell to the other cell. Occlude, which means it is a barrier for transporting substances from one cell to the other cell. Communicating junction, where this type of junctions allows some substances to pass easily from one cell to the other cell. So there is a gap between the cells which allows the transport of substances from one cell to the other cells. And the anchoring junction, the meaning for anchoring is it is going to attach the cell. So the anchoring junctions mainly provides attachment between two cells. So first we will study about tight junction. So as you know, it is a type of occluding junction. So here you can see there are two cells. In the apical region of these two cells, the cell membranes fused firmly. So this is a junction which is called as tight junction. So the other name for this tight junction is zonula occludens. The other name is zonula occludens, where because these cell membranes are fused firmly, it prevents the passage of larger molecules, whereas it allows passage of some smaller molecules from one cell to the other cell. So it is not a complete barrier. So it can allow small molecules from one cell to the other cell, but it acts as a barrier for larger molecules. So where these type of tight junctions are present, they are especially present, as you can see here, the tight junctions are present in the apical region of intestinal epithelial cells and in the renal tubules. They are also present in the capillary endothelial cells, in the choroid plexus, as well as in the endothelial cells of the for example, in the retina. So here you can see these tight junctions, they are especially present in the apical margins of epithelial cells. So why these are present here? These tight junctions, for example, if they're going to be present in the intestinal epithelial cells, they are not going to allow the undigested particles absorption, whereas they will allow the digested particles can be easily absorbed, because I told you the smallest particle can be absorbed in the absorbed through the they can pass through the tight junction, whereas it is going to be a barrier for larger molecules. So what will happen? The undigested materials cannot pass through this tight junction, whereas the digested materials, like the smallest materials, can pass through this tight junction. So what is the structure of this tight junction? So tight junction has ridges which has two halves, and one half of the ridge is from one cell and the other half of the ridge is from other cell, and both the halves of the ridges fuse with each other, and it occupies the space between the two cells, and each half of the ridge consists of tight junction strands. So this is the structure of the tight junction, and there are proteins which are forming the tight junction. These are two types: the integral membrane proteins and the peripheral membrane proteins. So the integral membrane proteins, they are occludin, claudin, and junctional adhesion molecules. As I told you, the other name for how you should remember the name of the protein which is forming the tight junction. Just remember the other name, zonula occludens. So the name of the protein is occludin, and the other name of other protein is claudin and junctional adhesion molecules. These three are the very important protein molecules which are forming the tight junction. The other proteins are singulin, symphylakin, and zonula occludens 1, 2, and 3. So these are the proteins which are the peripheral membrane proteins which are forming the tight junctions. So what is the function of tight junction? It provides strength and stability to the neighboring tissues. It acts as a selective barrier between the neighboring cells. As I told you, it is going to the barrier for larger molecules, but it can allow the smallest particles. And it prevents the lateral movement of proteins and lipids in the cell membrane, and thus it acts as a fence. So because of this fencing action, the cell membrane maintains the cell polarity. So normally at rest, the inner side of the cell membrane is negative and outside of the cell membrane is positive. This is because of this fencing action, which means the cell membrane, interior of the cell membrane is negative because of the presence of these proteins, which are the anions. And these tight junctions, they especially form blood-brain barrier. In the capillary endothelial cells of the brain, the tight junctions are present, which are forming the blood-brain barrier. This is not only the example, even we can say the outer retinal barrier. It is also formed by this tight junctions. So very important thing to remember about tight junctions is, the other name for tight junction is zonula occludens. It is present in the apical region of intestinal epithelial cells and in the renal tubules, and they form the blood-brain barrier. And the name of the proteins which are forming the tight junctions are occludin, claudin, and junction adhesion molecules. These are the integral proteins, and peripheral proteins are cingulin, sympleclin, and zonula occludens 1, 2, and 3. So all these are some of the very important points we should remember about tight junctions. And coming to the gap junctions. So gap junction is the junction where it allows passage of some ions like smaller molecules between two cells, and the other name for gap junction is nexus. The other name for gap junction is nexus, and it is especially, the gap junctions are present especially, and the more number of gap junctions are present in the cardiac muscles and also in the basal region of the epithelial cells. So we said apical region of the intestinal epithelial cells have tight junctions, whereas the basal region of the intestinal epithelial cells has gap junction. So these gap junctions, they are abundantly present in the cardiac muscle as well as in the smooth muscle. What is the significance of these gap junctions which is present in the cardiac muscle and in the smooth muscle? These gap junctions, they easily allow, they help in the rapid propagation of action potential from one cell to the other cell, so that the cardiac muscle can contract as a single unit. So that is very important significance of the gap junctions which are present in the cardiac muscle. And in the smooth muscle, the gap junctions which are present, they also, there are two different type of smooth muscle: single unit and cardiac multi-unit smooth muscle. Single unit, it is similar like cardiac muscle, so there are many gap junctions even in the single unit type of smooth muscle. So what is the structure of gap junction? So gap junctions are formed by channels, and it has two halves. Each channel has two halves, and one half of the channel is from one cell, the other half of the channel is from other cell. And these channels, in between these channels, the substances can pass easily through from one cell to the other cell. And these half of the channel, it is surrounded by 6 subunits of proteins. So we can say that there are two halves of the channel. Each half of the channel is surrounded by subunits of proteins, 6 subunits of protein, which are called as connexons or connexins. It is very important to remember this point. What is the name of the protein which is forming gap junction? That is connexin or connexon. This was the question which was asked in the previous year MCQ from Tamil Nadu University medical examination. So just remember, connexons are the proteins which are forming the gap junctions, and these connexons you can see here clearly. So here we have we can say that this is a cardiac muscle which will have more number of gap junctions. And the very important point to remember is, normal intercellular space is narrowed down from 15 to 20 nanometers to 3.5 to 2 to 3.5 nanometer. So intercellular space will narrow down in this gap junction. So it is reduced from 15 to 20 nanometer to 2 to 3.5 nanometer. And I told you there are proteins which are forming these gap junctions. So the name of these proteins are connexons. So here you can see it has two halves, right? Each channel has two halves. Here is one half, here is one half, and each half of the channel is surrounded by 6 subunits of proteins which are called as connexons. What is the significance of these connexons? There can be a mutation in the genes which are forming these connexon proteins, and it can lead to a disease which is called as Charcot-Marie tooth disease. The name of the disease is Charcot-Marie tooth disease. which can mainly affects peripheral neurons, and it can lead to peripheral neuropathy. So the mutation in the genes which are forming the connexin proteins. So that is the disease which is named as Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. So what is the function of gap junction? So it is going to permit the molecules like glucose, amino acids and ions and other substances, but they should have a molecular weight less than 1000. So glucose, amino acids, ion and the other molecules which will have molecular weight less than 1000 can easily pass through this gap junction, and it helps in the exchange of chemical messengers between the cells. I told you it helps in the rapid propagation of action potential from one cell to the other cell. That is why these gap junctions are present, especially in the cardiac muscle, which helps the muscle, cardiac muscle, to contract as a single unit. And the diameter of these channel proteins can be regulated especially by intracellular calcium ions. So whenever there is increase in the intracellular calcium ion, what will happen? The protein subunits of the connexins will come close together, and the diameter of the channel will decrease. And the diameter of the channel, it can also be regulated by changes in the pH, electrical potential, and some of the hormones can also change the diameter of these channels. So the next type of intercellular junction is anchoring junction. I told you anchoring, which means attachment. So these junctions are mainly provide the structural attachment between two cells or between cell and the extracellular matrix. So in the definition itself, we studied what is intercellular junction. It is a connection between two neighboring cells or between cell and the extracellular matrix. So these anchoring junctions, they are present both in between two cells or between cell and the extracellular matrix. So these anchoring junctions, they are also present in tissues like cardiac muscle and in the epidermis of skin, where the mechanical attachment is very much necessary. So here you can see there are 4 different types of anchoring junctions. So zonular adherence, desmosomes, hemidesmosomes and focal adhesion. So there are 2 different types of filaments which is going to make attachment based on the actin filament attachment and based on the intermediate filament attachment. I'll show you clearly of this classification. So the anchoring junctions are classified into 4 types. So based on the actin filament attachment, it is zonular adherence and focal adhesion. You can see that zonular adherence is the junction which is present in between two cells. So this is the cell to cell attachment which is formed by actin filaments, and here we have focal adhesion. There the cell and extracellular matrix are attached by this actin filament. So this junction is called focal adhesion. Okay, these two are the actin filament based attachment junctions, and the next 2 junctions are desmosome and hemidesmosome. So these are intermediate filament attached type of junctions. Here we can say that intermediate filaments are radiating, and there are 2 thickened areas in the cell membranes, so opposing cell membranes. So desmosomes are formed between 2 cells, whereas hemidesmosome is formed between cell and the extracellular matrix. So we'll study one by one. So the adherent junction, the other name of adherent junction is zonular adherence. It is especially present just below the tight junction. Just remember, zonular adherence is just below the zonula occludens. It is present in the basal side of the zonula occludens. This was the MCQ which was again asked in the university question. So which is the location of zonula adherence? It is just present just below the tight junctions, or we can say it is present in the basal side of the zonula occludens. And there are proteins which are forming this adherent junction is cadherins. As the name suggests, it is a calcium dependent cell adhesion molecule. So cadherins are the calcium dependent cell adhesion molecules. So adherins, just remember adherins, and the name of the proteins are cadherins. And I told you anchoring, it is a type of anchoring junction. So it is going to provide the mechanical attachment between 2 cells, and this is these adherent junction, it is present in the cardiac muscle, especially in the intercalated disc. So whenever the heart contract and relax, these cardiac muscles are held together tightly by this type of adherent junction. So it is also present in the epidermis, where it is going to withstand the mechanical stress. So this is adherent junction. So here you can see clearly the position, where the zonular adherence is present. So here you can see in the apical region we have tight junction, and in the basal region we have gap junction, and just below, that is the basal side of the zonula occludens, have this zonula adherence junction. That is just below the tight junction, the adherent junction is present. So here you can see in this picture clearly all the cell junctions where they are present. And then next is the focal adhesion. So these two, the adherent junction and the focal adhesion junction, both are actin filament based attachment type of junctions, where adherent junction is present in between the 2 cells. two cell membranes, whereas the focal adhesion is present between the cell and the extracellular matrix, but they are also formed by actin filament attachment type, and these also present in epithelial cells. And the proteins which are forming this focal adhesion are integrins. These are also a type of cell adhesion molecules which are forming this focal adhesion junction. And the next type is desmosome. I told you these two, desmosome and hemidesmosome, they both are intermediate filament type attachment junctions, and desmosome is present in between two cells. And here you can see the cell membrane of the neighboring cells at these junction, they are thickened and forms a patch like spots, and you can see the patches are present in both the sides of the cell membrane. That is why it is called as desmosome. Whereas in hemidesmosomes, only one spot like patch will be there. That is why it is called hemidesmosomes, which means hemi means half of the cell membrane. Only one half of the cell membrane is become thickened and forms a spot like patches. And the proteins which are forming this desmosomes are cadherins. Again, they are also, I told you, they are calcium dependent cell adhesion molecules. So the next last type of cell junction is hemidesmosomes. I told you it is present between the cell and the extracellular matrix. It is also a intermediate filament type attachment junction, and here only one half of the cell membrane is become thickened and spot like patches, and that is why it is named as hemidesmosomes or half desmosome. And the proteins which are forming this hemidesmosomes is integrins. So we'll move on to the multiple choice question area. Tight junction is a type of communicating junction, adherent junction, occluding junction, anchoring junction. I know you know the answer. It is the tight junction is a occluding junction. So the other name itself, zonula occludens, and which is not true about gap junction. So normal intercellular space narrowed down from 25 nanometer to 3 nanometer. Gap junctions are present abundantly in cardiac muscle. Gap junction is also called as zonula occludens. Activities of gap junctions are regulated by intracellular calcium concentration and pH, which is not true. Yes, the other name is not zonula occludens. The other name for gap junction is nexus. Zonula occludens is the other name for tight junction. All the other 3 points are true. Yes, in normal intercellular space is reduced from 25 nanometer to 3 nanometer in gap junctions, whereas the gap junctions are present abundantly in the cardiac muscle, and the diameter of the channel proteins, the connexons can be regulated by calcium, intracellular calcium level, as well as the pH. Zonula adherens is located in the, I told you this was the MCQ which was asked in the university exams. Zonula adherens is located on basal side of zonula occludens, apical region of epithelial cells, capillary endothelial wall of choroid plexus, basal membrane of epithelial cells. Which is the option? So yes, it is the basal side of zonula occludens. Zonula occludens is tight junction. So zonula adherens is just below the tight junction. So the basal side of zonula occludens is the answer here. Apical region of epithelial cells have the tight junction. Zonula occludens is present in the apical region of epithelial cells, and the capillary endothelial wall, again it has gap junctions. Basal membrane of epithelial cells, they have mainly the gap junctions. They are not containing zonula adherens. So you should know the location. Many MCQs comes from this intercellular junction chapter. So the major site of attachment of intracellular microfilament is, major site of attachment of intracellular microfilaments is zonula adherens, desmosomes, hemidesmosomes, zonula occludens. So which is the answer? So intracellular filaments are mainly attached in the desmosomes. Zonula adherens, zonula occludens, desmosomes and hemidesmosomes. So the desmosome is the answer. And Charcot-Marie tooth disease is due to mutation in genes coding occluding claudin and characterized by peripheral neuropathy. Mutation in the gene coding specific connection affects peripheral neurons. Mutation in genes coding for desmosomes, mutation in genes coding for hemidesmosomes. So which is the answer? I told you Charcot-Marie tooth disease is due to mutation in the genes which is coding for proteins which are forming the gap junctions, that is connexons, and they mainly affects the peripheral neurons. That is why the future of this disease is mainly peripheral neuropathy. What of the following is true about focal adhesion? It provides strength and stability to the cells, play important role in cell movement by attaching with actin filaments, prevent filtration of proteins, play a role in metastasis of tumor and tissues. So which is the answer? So they play important role in cell movement by attaching with actin filaments. Focal adhesion, I told you, it is a type of actin filament attached molecule which is between the cell and the extracellular matrix. So they mainly helps in the cell movement. Which type of intracellular junction allows passage of glucose and amino acids? So I know you know. So nexus, zonula occludens, zonula adherens, and macula adherens. So which is the answer? So nexus. You know the other name for gap junction is nexus. So gap junctions allows glucose and amino acids to pass easily. Zonula occludens is a barrier. Zonula adherens is a junction which provides a mechanical attachment to the tissues. Macula adherens is the other name for zonula. Zonula adherens. Sorry, macula adherens is the other name for which type of junction? Please find out. Proteins involved in cell junctions that attaches cell to its extracellular matrix are integrins, occludin, claudin, and cadherins. So proteins involved in cell junctions that attaches cells to its extracellular matrix are They are integrins. So integrins are the proteins which are mainly involved in the formation of focal adhesion as well as hemidesmosomes. Gap junctions are present plentifully in, yes, it is obvious, it is in the cardiac muscle. The answer is cardiac muscle. A gap junction is made up of dash connexons and each of which is made up of dash connexins. So how many connexons are there? So there are two channels, right? 2, and there are 6 subunits of proteins, that is connexins. So 2 and 6 is the answer for this question. Which of the following attaches cells to its basal lamina? Cell to its basal lamina. Zonula occludens, no. Desmosomes, hemidesmosomes, claudin. Yes, the answer is hemidesmosome because desmosome is present between two cells. Zonula occludens is also present in between the two cells. Claudin is a cell adhesion